Chancellor Garanzini, President Pellicero, Provost Boyle, Dean Hyder, Sister Jean, and members of the class of 2016, it is a great honor to be here with you today. Now, especially to all your parents and family members, a shout out and congratulations on the moment which must bring all of you great satisfaction. And I too am grateful, most grateful for this invitation and for the honorary degree, which is something not I, or certainly not the professors who taught me here, could ever have imagined in our wildest dreams. When I graduated from Loyola, the speaker was a distinguished academic. I forget what distinguished him. I don't remember his name. I only remember that he was boring. I will try to avoid that and to be brief, which he was not, and give a little advice. Of course, in TV news, we usually only get about a minute and a half, so I know about brief. In fact, if video had been invented at the time of the Old Testament, you might have seen something like this on your phone. Good evening from CBS News. This is Newsbreak. At Mount Sinai today, God gave Moses 10 commandments. Here are the 3 most important. So, you guys, welcome to the rest of your life. It's a time in which technology has completely transformed the ways in which we learn and interact with our fellow humans. And you are the communicators who will use these tools in the future. The challenge is that you'll be doing it at a time, when public trust in government, politicians, and the media is near an all-time low. This makes reliable information more important than ever. But how, in today's media world, can you know what to believe? A humor columnist for the Washington Post once wrote, "Imagine how many more newspapers we could sell if our headlines didn't have to be true." Little did he know. That was before clickbait. Before those tantalizing internet headlines which stretch the facts to get you to open the story. When I first started in this business, we took ourselves very seriously. The major news organizations, including the networks, believed that they had a responsibility to tell people what they needed to know. And there was no one with any real influence or any real reach to say otherwise. Pardon me. When Ed Murrow reported from a London rooftop during the World War II bombing of the city, when a young David Brinkley informed the nation that President Roosevelt had died at Warm Springs, Georgia, when Walter Cronkite said that President Kennedy was dead in Dallas, they spoke to a nation that was unified and a nation which largely trusted its government and the press. In 1981, when I began covering the White House, there were only 3 network news broadcasts every night, no cable yet, no internet, and the news each evening was what we said it was. And in those days, we had hours, sometimes all day, to develop a story. Of course, we still had to fight to get them on the air. In the 22 minutes on the evening news, which remained for news after the commercials. But that conflict over time, by the way, for news and documentaries on television emerged shortly after the Second World War as broadcast journalism began to grow. And that is what drove Edward R. Murrow away from CBS. Nearly 60 years ago, here in Chicago, Murrow told the Radio and Television News Directors Association that radio and TV news were, in his words, part of an incompatible combination of show business, advertising, and news. And he said, When you get all three under one roof, the dust never settles. That's even more true today across all platforms than it was in 1958. Thousands of voices now, hundreds of platforms. The news cycle is no longer half a day, morning and evening, it's more like half a minute. People can choose what they wish to know. They can tailor things to their own beliefs. And we live in a media environment which does very little to separate the news from show business and trivia. You can watch people put rubber bands on a watermelon until it explodes. And you have, haven't you? Or on the same website, you can follow coverage of the election. It's been observed that the internet breeds what's been called truth by consensus, that is, belief without regard to fact, information replacing knowledge. Now, of course, people have always believed what they want to believe, but the availability of unfiltered, unverified information from many sources makes it easier than ever to do so. As the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan famously said, "You're entitled to your own opinion, but not to your own facts." As communicators, it'll be your responsibility to make the facts available. In today's media world, the burden of proof is on the consumer. The consumer has to decide whether a piece of information, whether it is a news story, a news release on a website from a corporation, whether it's worthy of belief. There will always be competing agendas. Take the White House, for example. All presidents want press coverage to reflect their message. Ronald Reagan's image maker told me in 1981, he said, "We're going to go over your heads," and he's going to speak directly to the people. The goal then and today is to bypass the press filter. It didn't work that well in 1981 because the news wires and broadcasting set the agenda. But today, this White House and the previous one can go direct to the public. They do. Blogs, email blasts, a weekly TV broadcast on its website of events from the inside that the press is not allowed to cover. Or this year's crazy presidential primary season. It hasn't been easy for the people on the campaign trail. Most of them, by the way, are starting out in this business. They're only a few years older than you. They've been subjected to verbal and even physical harassment by those who saw their coverage as unfriendly. In a world of competing agendas, it's hard to get the truth, especially when people are preoccupied with the appearance of things rather than the substance. But it's important to make the effort. So are you willing to produce high-quality content that is as clickable as an exploding watermelon? Some of you will be journalists. I know some of you will be advocates for various other causes. But for all of you, the truth has to come first. You have the tools to be critical thinkers. You earned them here. So use them. Dare to try. Be willing to fail. Learn from that and try again. That's my first piece of advice. Here's another. Work harder than anyone else and be open to change. When I was a senior here, I tried to convince Loyola's administration to apply for a radio station license. That didn't happen for another 20 years. So there went my job plan number one. Instead, I went to law school, got tired of that quickly, and found a job on local TV in Milwaukee. After a few years, I heard about a fellowship offered by CBS News at Columbia University in New York. That led to the job which I have now. So here's the point. As an old boss of mine used to say, it is important to be firmly flexible. You may not always achieve your goals, but it's important to have them. And don't be surprised if they lead you to new, unexpected places. And here's something else. It's really not all about you. Here at Loyola, you learned more than just the techniques of communication. You learned, as you heard so eloquently a moment ago, to be women and men for others. Representative John Lewis, a member of Congress from Georgia, was in his early 20s when I covered him working with Dr. Martin Luther King to register voters in the South. He was beaten and gassed in Selma, Alabama. He said then that you have to be, in his words, willing to get in the way, to put yourself on the line for change. 50 years later, when I saw him back in Selma for the anniversary last year, he said the same thing. Get in the way. It doesn't matter whether you're working in advertising, public relations, journalism, or digital media. You could be an advocate for justice wherever you are. The world cries out for it. Cries out for it in the voices of war-weary victims, refugees of violence. So reach out. Reach out to the excluded, to the marginalized, whether they're in your immediate circle or in the wider world. Treat everyone with respect, from the big boss upstairs to the homeless person on the street outside. Make room in your life for others, family and friends. And finally, discover the power of detachment. You grew up in a world wired for instant communication. You learned to use it when you were children. You're on Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram and Periscope and Yik Yak and everything else. So find time to step away from it all every day. Spend that time in live conversation or in contemplation. Father Adolfo Nicolas, the Superior General of the Jesuits, put it this way. He said, try to enjoy silence. If you come to enjoy silence, being alone, then you will find out that you are not alone. Then you can start a conversation. I wish you all soul-nourishing work and happy lives, and most of all, the blessings of family, children, and friends to love. Congratulations and thank you.